Hello. It is oh, Power Thinking Wednesday, right? um, it's 2:46 a.m. March 26th. And I've done I know how sometimes you do your recordings and then you're in the midst of wondering if you should publish or not. Yeah, you put some uh it's not necessarily doubt. There's just some things you say and not ready to be released, right? Um, because of timing. And so I was going back to the last thing I published, about slap your mama chicken, because it was an experience uh, of eating a baked chicken that was intended for a gathering, and at the last minute, I just said no. I'm not, because somebody else said they were going to bring chicken, right? And I was like, okay, you bring the chicken, and I keep, I keep my chicken with closest friends, um, and that is one reason why I don't do potlucks. Um, that's one reason why I really stopped gathering around food. Um, these days I like to eat alone. Um, because there's like it's a pretense for me. I'm comfortable if, I'm paying for the meal, you know, just because I don't want anything. Um, but then I see how people, they eat and run, right? And I try not to do that. I try, to not necessarily solve someone's problem, because I can't do that, because I try to do that time and time again. It's just I try to give that person an experience, and yeah, on one date, I said I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to eat with him, and then he kept on asking repeatedly because there was something that he needed to say, and the moment that he said it, I'm like, oh man, I didn't need to know this, right? Um, and it seems, with the group, the culture that I hang around lately involving eating meals, it's like, man, really? Why? I'm like, you know, because I have acid reflux, so so I take my medication daily, and but when you drop some kind of information over a meal, um, my stomach tends to churn. So I That's what I was thinking with that. My last recording, you slap your mama chicken, right? And here I am, 8 days later, right? Almost 10 days later. And, uh, so, damn it, Peterson, right? Um, because, he has said some very good things in a public setting. It just seems now that he's in these dialogues with men of influence. Um, I hate to be critical, but it's just like, man, I sometimes when I just sit around and listen to guys talk, I'm like, oh my god. So, it is almost 6:30 going into this, right? 6 minutes, 30 seconds. So I'm reading out of the Art of Happiness, a handbook for living, His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, and Howard C. Cutler, MD. So out of the so that's my perspective out of the moment, right? So I'm reading out of the chapter uh, shifting perspective. And this is, yes, shifting, chapter 10, shifting perspective. And we're basically talking about transforming suffering, right? So, discovering new perspectives. And I'm going into this cold. So, just to have an honest reaction on this section. In trying to apply the Dalai Lama's method of shifting perspective on the enemy, which I have 4 that I've listed on Facebook at the moment. You gotta name your enemies, right? Gotta name your enemies. Better do it. Because those are the guys that are gonna rise, make you rise. They're your catalysts. Thank you, T.D. Jakes. All right. I happened to stumble upon another technique one afternoon. Okay. During the course of preparing for this book, I attended some teachings by the Dalai Lama on the East Coast. All right. On my return home, I took a nonstop flight back to Phoenix. As usual, I had booked an aisle seat. Despite having just attended spiritual teachings, I was in a rather cranky mood. Oh, you can have a cranky mood, even if you participate in spiritual teachings or a biblical humanities class. Okay, I am human. I was in a rather cranky mood as I boarded the packed plane. Hmm. Then I discovered I had been mistakenly assigned a center seat. That happens to me a lot. I do not like to be in the center. But everybody says, you got to get in the middle. I'm like, what? Who said you got to get in the middle of shit? I don't understand. Okay, so I digress. So, sandwiched between a man of generous proportions, I know that, who had the annoying habit of draping his thick forearm over my side of the armrest, and a middle-aged woman whom I took a immediate dislike to because I decided she had usurped my aisle seat. Okay. I love it already. Somebody else that thinks like me, right? In suspiciousness, in jealousy, in bitterness, which is just, referring to our sexual conduct, which is lust, right? And lust. So, so this guy comes from a spiritual gathering, and he's taking nonstop flight to Phoenix. And he's got to be with the cattle, basically. He doesn't get to fly. So, he doesn't get to fly first class, right? I get it. He's not that important enough. So, it's with the cattle. And yeah, um, let me tell you, it's hard. It's hard to overcome in dating size, right? Because I battled with that, uh for the longest time, I was about like 220, and I could never break 200, right? I could never get lower than 200. Um because I couldn't take any responsibility that my weight was dependent on what I was eating, right? Mm, or my weight was also dependent on the medications I was taking. Yeah, making my blood sugary, thick and syrupy. So, so I couldn't. So it wasn't until uh, I decided to detox off my medications that I went through. It was arduous. Yeah, maybe that's the word. Arduous. Yeah. I just came to a point where, okay, I cannot use medication anymore. I have to have my feelings back, and I have to learn how to own them and have them. Basically, I had to learn how to be confrontational. Yeah, I um I couldn't, just walk through life as a zombie anymore, and and be so medicated, um that everybody thought, everybody liked me because I was non-confrontational. I did that for 7 years, and but yeah, during the pandemic, I was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't function at work and be a yes man, um, because I was seeing things and I couldn't unsee them anymore, right? So that's that feeling of, so that guy in this, that guy that has his thick forearm over my side of the armrest. That's what I was, yeah, that's what, very good guided imagery as far as someone just getting in my space. And, this person, went through the trouble of getting the aisle seat because, um, he knew he's going to have those feelings during the flight if he was going to have any other seat. And then, uh, yeah, and that just immediate dislike because he had decided she had usurped, basically taken hostage his aisle seat, right? Because why is she sitting there when he had gone through all this trouble for him to have a seat? So yeah, me and seating, I am same way on seating. So there was something that about this woman that really bothered me. Her voice a bit too shrill, her manner a bit too imperial. I'm not sure. Right after takeoff, she began talking continuously to the man sitting directly in front of her. The man turned out to be her husband, and I gallantly offered to exchange seats with him. But they wouldn't have it. They both wanted aisle seats. I grew more annoyed. The prospect of 5 solid hours seated next to this woman seemed unbearable. Yeah, I hate it when people want their own way, right? It just annoys me. Especially when it keeps me from having my way. Just, Now, this is the truth, man. This is the truth. So, realizing that I was reacting so strongly to a woman whom I didn't even know, I decided that it must be transference. Yeah, word of the day. So, what's going on here? Why? What's going on? Who am I really angry at? She must subconsciously remind me of someone from my childhood. The old unresolved feelings of hate toward my mother or something. I racked my brain but couldn't come up with a likely candidate. She just didn't remind me of anyone from my past. It then occurred to me that this was the perfect opportunity to practice developing patience. So I started in on the technique of visualizing my enemy in my aisle seat as a cherished benefactor, placed next to me to teach me patience and tolerance. Whatever. I figured this should be a snap. After all, as enemies go, you couldn't get any milder than this. I had just met this woman, and she hadn't actually done anything to harm me. After about 20 minutes, I gave it up. She still bugged me. So patience. So what? So what? Guided imagery didn't work? Your guided imagery meditation didn't work? It's like, I resigned myself to remaining irritable for the rest of the flight. You know what? This is something that I love about nicotine, anonymous, Nika, in regards to smoking, right? They just say if you smoke a cigarette, you're just not in acceptance. And I was like, I would always just come up with all these reasons, right? You know, not smoking, right? Uh, and yeah, and I now remember, on my mini quits, just being like sweating profusely because I didn't have nicotine. But, through a course of practicing mini quits now, it's like, it's not, it's just more of a preference for me now, right? I like to smoke, so, but I don't always get to, you know, I don't always get to. I used to think it was a life and death situation for me, I bought into the addiction part, side of it. But after just practicing, you know, I don't have to have a nicotine replacement. It's just, I just have to choose to sit here and just be irritable. Right? I just have to own the feeling, you know, and the feeling is I am, when I smoke, I don't have to be in acceptance. I'm using a substance, right? That I find very pleasurable to process my anger. However, I don't always get to have that. And so, right now, you know, I just have to sit with the irritability and be in acceptance that I don't have any nicotine, you know. So, and then I do this stuff, read out loud. But, it's not that bad if I have one listener, if I have one fan. Um, so, okay. I gave it up. She still bugged me. And I resigned myself to remaining irritable for the rest of the flight. Sulking, I glared at one of her hands that was furtively encroaching on my armrest. Okay, now you know, it's like I think about the claw. Jim Carrey, the claw. It's like, how dare you infringe upon my rights? The claw. I hated everything about this woman. I was staring absently at her thumbnail when it occurred to me, do I hate that thumbnail? Not really. It was just an ordinary thumbnail, unremarkable. Next, I glanced at her eye and asked myself, do I really hate that eye? Yes, I did. Of course. For no good reason, which is the purest form of hate. Just, I just don't like you, man. I have no reason behind it. I just don't like you. I focus in closer. Do I hate that pupil? No. Do I hate the cornea, the iris, or the sclera? No. So do I really hate the eye? I had to admit that I didn't. I felt that I was on to something. I moved on to a knuckle, a finger, a jaw, and then an elbow. And see, now he's going into some guided imagery. Yeah. Which when I did my session with Dr. Hadid today, it was like, okay, it had been, I have been so in charge of my meditative practices for, oh, I guess for the last 3 years now, that yeah, since, yeah. Mm, well, I guess in 2021, I was doing Matthew Seeley hypnosis that was on YouTube and everything. And, I was fearful at first, but I was, I was doing one of these meditations, and I kind of went into a dream state where I was just sitting in my room, and then I saw, you know, I saw an image with a guy with a sickle. He was coming at me, and he just vanished, right? And I was like, fuck that shit. With some meditation. And I was like, no, no, no. I'm gonna control my meditations from now on. But so for the so this uh so on Tuesday, we're in Wednesday. So about, 12 hours ago, a little over, maybe 13 hours ago, I let a doctor I did not know, but I'm getting to know her, guide me through a meditative process that I let another person I did not know in my past do it, and I really liked how he did it. So that's what I'm getting to. I'm trusting her, and I'm learning to trust someone I just met that I haven't seen face to face, but we both share the love of voice and tone, auditory, right? So, since we share that in common, and he likes to hear my voice, yeah, I like Dr. Hadid's voice, so sure. Now those enemies, that I have posted on Facebook, I don't like their tone of voices. So that's just a proclamation. In the end, I didn't like their voice. The sound of their voice, what their voice represented, I just didn't like their voice. And they didn't like mine. And that's okay, because I found other people to hang around with. So I don't have to be part of that clique under Magneto. But I still will call it out. Because I'm just, because I am, am Marvel. And I always think about First Class, right? Okay. So with some surprise, I realized that there were parts of this woman that I didn't hate. Focusing on details, on particulars, instead of overgeneralizations, allowed a subtle internal change, a softening. I love that, a softening. This shift of perspective tore an opening in my prejudice just wide enough to look at her as simply another human being. As I was feeling this, she suddenly turned to me and started a conversation. I don't remember what we talked about. It was small talk mostly. But by the end of the flight, my anger and annoyance had been diffused. Granted, she wasn't my new best friend, but also she was no longer the evil usurper of my aisle seat. Just another human being like me, moving through life as best she could. All right. So, like I said, just opening a book that is not the Bible. Okay? And it's considered spiritual literature, it's stories from the Dalai Lama, you know? Like, he ain't perfect. So, uh, that's one of the reasons I've gone back to paganism, because it seems like, when I go into, go into the Bible, I'm looking for that scripture that's going to validate what to do with that person that's sitting in my aisle seat. You get it? I'm going in there, with hate, with anger.